She thought a text and a bank transfer would end 15 years of marriage. What she didn't know was, I'd built a system designed for this exact moment. I'm not coming back. I've met someone better and already moved your things to storage. The text arrived at 11:42 p.m. on a Thursday. I remember the time exactly because the microwave clock glowed beside me in the kitchen as I read it. I was finishing my second cup of coffee for the night. Bad habit, but habits are hard to break, especially when you've spent the last 15 years pretending your world isn't quietly cracking underneath you. Dana was supposed to be on day 4 of a girl's trip to Palm Springs. Attached to the message was a screenshot. $118,000 withdrawn from our joint savings, transferred to her personal account. The image had a casual quality to it, like she was showing off a beach photo or a new yoga pose. There was no explanation, no apology, just a captionless image confirming that she had taken nearly every liquid dollar we had together. I didn't throw my mug. I didn't scream. I set my phone down, finished my coffee, and looked out the window at the empty patio bathed in the glow of a nearby street lamp. I had the oddest thought, how quiet the world can be in the middle of disaster. 15 years, reduced to 2 sentences and a transaction receipt. There had been signs, of course. Weekend getaways with her wellness circle had started lasting longer. She wore new clothes she never seemed to wear around me. Calls ended quickly when I entered a room. A few times I caught her switching tabs or tilting her phone away, always with a smile a beat too late to be genuine. I'm a forensic accountant. Discrepancies are what I notice for a living. Irregularities in data, inconsistent numbers, buried transactions. But I'd said nothing. I suppose that was my first mistake, confusing professional skill with emotional blindness. Or maybe my mistake was believing someone who once told me, I don't need to understand what you do. I just need to know you can provide. That sentence echoed louder in the silence of our kitchen than her text message had. It was one of her favorites. Dana never cared about the mechanics of my work, just that the balance stayed high and the lifestyle stayed comfortable. I picked up my phone. Again, the screen still glared her betrayal. A second notification popped in. A low balance alert from the joint account. Just under $12.47 remained. I opened my laptop. A matte gray ThinkPad she had mocked once for being ridiculously plain. Typed in credentials for an email account she didn't know existed. It was connected to my private alert system, one that triggered any time someone tried to reset credentials or change account access on my high-security financial systems. 3 alerts had come in earlier that day. Dana hadn't just cleaned out the account. She had tried to access backup assets, password changes, IP pings from a new device, login attempts on systems she'd never seen. She was being thorough. Sloppy, but thorough. And I had to respect the effort in a detached sort of way. I didn't reply to her text. Instead, I opened a secure messaging app and typed 2 words to my brother. It's time. A minute later, he responded, You sure? She made her move. I sat back in my chair and stared at the only photo still hanging in our condo, our wedding day. Her hand rested on my chest, her eyes fixed on the camera with practiced warmth. I looked dazed in the photo, almost like a guest at someone else's ceremony. In retrospect, maybe I was. I remember how we met, a University of Iowa alumni mixer. I was 38, recently divorced, and exhausted from trying to grow my practice from nothing. Dana was 34, radiant, social, charismatic in a way that made people lean in when she talked. She had a yoga mat slung over one shoulder and a way of dismissing everything serious with a joke. She called me Spreadsheet Superman before I'd even finished telling her what I did. We married after a year. I paid for her studio, bought us the house she wanted, let her upgrade our cars every 3 years. We hosted brunches, took vacations to places I never picked, and lived a life that looked ideal if you didn't peer too closely. But I had always peered. I noticed everything. She forgot my birthday last year, blamed it on stress from the studio expansion, made up for it with an expensive watch she didn't know I already owned in a different color. That night, After she fell asleep, I activated the first layer of my contingency plan. Not because I didn't trust her, but because I finally trusted my instincts. People think accountants are boring, but numbers tell the truth, and the truth doesn't need decoration. Dana never wanted the truth. She wanted a version of life that made her feel important. I gave her that, and in return, she gave me a reminder. No matter how smart you are, love makes you hesitate. But I wouldn't hesitate again. I reached for my phone one last time and typed 2 words into the reply field beneath her message. Good luck. Then I hit send and started everything. We met at an alumni mixer neither of us wanted to attend. I was 38, recently divorced from a short-lived marriage that burned out faster than it began. At the time, I was laser-focused on building my practice, devouring financial case law, setting up client structures, auditing corporate fraud for mid-size firms. The only reason I even showed up was because my assistant Valerie had gently bullied me into it. You need people, Leonard, she said, not just spreadsheets. Dana was 34, a fitness instructor with a degree in kinesiology, and more charm than most people knew what to do with. She had a voice like warm coffee and a laugh that made you want to tell her your best stories, even if they weren't that funny. She said she liked my glasses. I said I liked her confidence. We ended up talking for 3 hours, mostly about music and the merits of Thai food. We went out the next week. Then again. Then again. By our 6th date, she had left a toothbrush at my condo. By our 3rd month, she had a drawer. Within a year, she had a key and a wedding ring. It felt fast but right. Or so I thought. At first, I found her disinterest in my work charming. I don't need to understand what you do, she'd say, her legs curled under her on the couch while scrolling through her phone. As long as you're happy doing it and it pays for brunch. It was a joke. I laughed. We both did, but jokes have roots. When I tried to explain what I did, how forensic audits uncovered millions in hidden embezzlements, her eyes glazed over. She'd nod, hum distractedly, then pivot to topics like smoothie ingredients or a new yoga pose. The conversation slowly turned into monologues, then into silence. I learned not to bring work home, not because she asked, but because she never asked about it. Looking back, I can pinpoint the moments where she chipped away at me, softly and without intention. There was the time I won an industry award, nothing flashy, just a plaque recognizing me for integrity in financial consulting. I brought it home, set it on the entry table. She never noticed it. When I mentioned it a week later, she said, "Oh, I thought it was something you got from a conference. You know I'm not a plaque person." When she started her yoga studio, I funded everything. First and last month's rent, equipment, marketing. I even created her accounting system. She told her friends she built it from scratch. That one stung more than it should have. She called me her rock. I believed her, until I realized rocks aren't appreciated. They're stepped over. 6 years into our marriage, I found myself on my father's porch in Des Moines. We were fixing a warped deck board, him hammering methodically while I passed him nails. "You okay, son?" he asked, not looking up. "Sure." He hammered in silence, then said, "You ever notice how Dana spends a lot of your money?" I didn't answer. "She's got taste," he added quickly, as if that softened it. "I want her to have nice things," I said. He looked at me then, really looked. "Just make sure she values how you get them." That night, I started quietly shifting. Assets, nothing illegal. Just smart protections, LLCs, personal trusts, a few crypto allocations, one offshore holding for international clients. Dana knew about the joint checking and the savings. That's all. The more independent she became, hosting wellness retreats, collaborating with fitness influencers, the more distant she felt. Her Instagram started filling with beach shots, group yoga poses, smoothie bowls, motivational captions. None of them included me. "It's just work," she'd say when I asked. But she never asked about mine. One night, I showed her a spreadsheet I was building to help small businesses track tax fraud exposure. She looked at it for 3 seconds, then said, God, you really do love your little numbers, huh? Little numbers. It wasn't meant as cruelty. That's what made it worse. It was casual dismissal, indifference baked into every sentence. Another flash. Last Christmas. She forgot my birthday. We were sitting in front of the fireplace. I handed her a gift I'd spent weeks finding, a rare first edition of her favorite wellness author's book. She opened it, smiled, kissed me, and then asked, "Wait, wasn't your birthday yesterday?" I said yes. She looked horrified for about 2 seconds, then ran upstairs and came back 20 minutes later with a hastily wrapped box, an expensive watch I already had in a different color. I've been so busy with the studio, you know how it is. That night while she slept, I finalized the structure of my contingency plan, uploaded the last of the legal documentation, created access permissions for Jason, flagged the accounts she didn't know existed, not because I expected betrayal, because I couldn't ignore the possibility anymore. She once said, "I just want to live well." I used to think she meant with me. Now I realized she meant comfortably, easily, without friction and without anyone standing in her way. I thought I was giving her the life she wanted, but the truth is, she was building a life without me in it for a long time. I just hadn't been ready to see it, Jason answered on the second ring. "Is it time?" he asked without preamble. "It's time," I replied. "All right, you want the soft lockdown or full deployment?" "Full." He didn't ask anything else. He just said, "I'll send the confirmations to your secure line." We hung up. Jason and I had spent years on this plan. It started as a joke, a what-if conversation after one too many beers during a Thanksgiving visit. At the time, I said, "If I ever get cleaned out, I need a kill switch." Jason, a digital security consultant for a firm that worked with defense contractors, took it seriously. "Let's build one," he said. That was 4 years ago. I never imagined I'd need it. But I did. And now, it was saving me from ruin. I opened my laptop, typed in a passphrase, and watched the system boot up, an interface I'd designed myself, a simple UI with only 3 commands: freeze 2, flag 3. File I clicked freeze first. Within minutes, every joint account, credit card, and shared line of credit was locked. Dana's spending spree would halt mid-swipe. Anything she tried to open in our names, denied. Our shared utilities, flagged for review. The condo's home equity line, frozen. Then I moved to flag. This sent alerts to my private banking contacts. People I'd worked with for years, auditors, fraud analysts, even a few discreet branch managers. They knew the code. I submitted documentation of the $118,000 transfer, along with a summary of Dana's attempted password changes. By morning, the transaction would be reversed or under fraud investigation. At worst, it would stall her access to the funds. At best, I'd get most of it back and lock her out of everything. Finally, I clicked File. That sent an encrypted folder to my lawyer, Marla Benson. Inside, documentation of financial misconduct, a pre-drafted divorce petition, asset disclosure, files, and a formal request for emergency asset protection. Marla had helped me design the legal side of this system. I paid her triple her regular retainer for it. Not because I expected betrayal, but because I believed in insurance. Most people think betrayal is sudden, a cheating text, a late-night call, a confession. It's not. It's slow. It's quiet. It's in the way someone looks through you instead of at you. In the way they say we less and I more. Betrayal happens in inches. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I moved, efficiently, calmly. That night, after I clicked File, I opened my secure note folder. There, I had logged a memory, one I'd written 2 years ago. A turning point. It was the night of Dana's studio expansion fundraiser. She'd rented out a boutique hotel rooftop and invited dozens of her fitness influencer friends. I came straight from work, still in a blazer, and stood by the bar nursing a single drink while she fluttered between conversations, barely acknowledging. A guy in cargo joggers came up and asked if I was Dana's manager. "No," I said. "I'm her husband." He raised an eyebrow. Oh, cool. I didn't know she was married. When I mentioned it to her later that night, she laughed. You know how it is, she said. My audience is mostly women. It's better for business. If they don't know I'm locked down. Locked down. That was the night I updated the protocol from soft lockdown to full deployment. I stared at that memory for a while. Then closed the folder. It wasn't that I'd stopped loving her. That's what people always assume. That if you're prepared for the worst, you never cared in the first place. But that's not true. I loved her enough to give her everything she asked for. I loved her enough to build a life that suited her. Even if it didn't suit me, I loved her enough to hope she'd never give me a reason to use the system I built to protect myself from her. But I loved myself enough to finally stop pretending. At 2:17 a.m., I sent one last message to Marla. File the paperwork at opening. Emergency petition included. Then I shut my laptop, poured myself another coffee, and sat in the silence of my condo. Now just my condo. No Dana, no shared plans. No illusions, just quiet, and the system I built to make sure I wouldn't be destroyed by loving the wrong person. Valerie buzzed my office at 10:13 a.m. Leonard, she said, voice low. Your wife is here. She's very insistent. I closed my laptop, let her in. A few seconds later, the door opened and Dana walked in like she owned the place. Same designer sunglasses, same perfectly matched yoga outfit. She looked like she'd just come from a branding shoot for luxury athleisure, but her eyes betrayed her. Leonard, she started with a smile too wide. There's been a huge misunderstanding with the bank. All our accounts are frozen. My cards aren't working. Something's wrong. She spoke loud enough for Valerie to hear outside the door. I stood slowly. It's not a misunderstanding. She blinked. Excuse me? You transferred money from a joint account without my consent. The bank flagged it as potential fraud. Her smile flickered. It's a joint account, Leonard. I'm your wife. I didn't need your consent. You're my soon-to-be ex-wife, I said calmly, who emptied our savings account while informing me, via text, that you'd moved out and found someone else. She closed the door behind her and lowered her voice. You cannot do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm protecting myself, that's all. She stepped forward, voice sharp. I've already put deposits down on a new place. I've made commitments. Yes, I said, to Trey Harmon. Her mouth dropped open. How do you know? You've been tagging him for months. I may not live on Instagram, but I'm not blind. And I'm a forensic accountant, Dana. Do you really think I wouldn't find out where the money went? Face went pale. You're investigating me? I'm documenting fraud, I corrected. There's a difference. I'll fight this, she snapped. I deserve half of everything. I leaned back against the desk and looked at her, not angrily, just with the kind of clarity that only comes when the fog finally lifts. You'll get half of what you knew about. But you seem to be under the impression that our joint savings account was all there is. Now her confusion turned to panic. What are you talking about? You'll find out in discovery. Her mouth opened, closed. She reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. You can't do this. This is vindictive. I left because I wasn't happy, Leonard. You stopped trying. You checked out years ago. No, I said. I didn't check out. I just stopped pretending. She paced in front of my desk like a caged animal. You don't have to ruin me over this. I'm not ruining you. I'm letting your choices speak for themselves. She stared at me, something behind her eyes twisting, anger, fear, maybe shame, but she hid it fast. You always were a coward, she said bitterly, always hiding behind numbers and rules. I should have left you sooner. I didn't flinch. You probably should have. There was a long silence. She stood there, still and unsure for the first time in years, like someone who had walked into the wrong house and suddenly realized it wasn't theirs anymore. I walked around the desk and opened the door. Valerie looked up. If she calls again, I said, loud enough for Dana to hear, tell her to contact my attorney. Dana stood in place for another beat, then brushed past me without another word. When the door clicked shut behind her, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't relief, it wasn't satisfaction, it was finality. 15 years of my life had just walked out of my office in $300 sneakers, and I didn't feel anything. Not yet. Not really. I closed the door, sat back at my desk, and opened my email. There was work to do. Because this wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jason's apartment looked like a hacker's cave. Multiple monitors, cables, notebooks with chaotic shorthand, and the unmistakable smell of stale coffee. He handed me a bottle of water and spun one of the chairs around for me to sit. "This won't take long," he said, already typing furiously. I nodded, my mind already a few steps ahead. I need everything on Harmon Fitness LLC. Personal, business, credit lines, anything Dana might be linked to. Jason grunted. "Legal channels only, right?" I gave him a look. Right, legal-ish. He smirked. "Just connecting public dots faster than most people can." He worked in silence, occasionally muttering to himself. I watched the code scroll, watched him dig through layers of public records, credit applications, digital footprints. It reminded me why we'd made such a good team. Him with the keys to digital vaults, me with the maps to the financial tunnels behind them. After 30 minutes, he turned to me with a grim look. "Well, the good news is, you were right. The bad news? It's worse than you thought." He brought up a document. "Here, 2 months ago, Dana co-signed a car loan with Trey. $45,000. His credit was garbage. Her signature got him approved." He clicked to another tab. "This one's bigger. A $175,000 equipment loan for the gym. Guess who else co-signed?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. "She used your marital status to leverage better terms," Jason said. "The loan doc literally lists Leonard Kessler's spouse as implied collateral. Whether you signed it or not, the bank factored your income and credit score into approval." "She didn't tell me." I said flat. "She didn't have to. That's the beauty of these applications. She claimed you were backing her. The bank often just checks the numbers and stamps it." Jason brought up another screen. "And here's the real kicker. Dana started funneling money from your joint account over a year ago. Small transfers. At first, $500 here, $1,000 there. Then it ramped up. Most of it went to Harmon Fitness's business account. Total, just shy of $80,000. I stared at the screen. She hadn't just left me. She'd been planning her exit for over a year, funding Trey's failing gym, leveraging my name, my money, my silence. "You all right?" Jason asked. I nodded slowly. "Yeah." Just seeing the full picture now. There had been moments, quiet ones, where I'd felt like a stranger in my own marriage. Nights when Dana would go to bed early after claiming she was exhausted, but her phone buzzed for hours behind the bathroom door. Days when she disappeared to retreats that never quite made it onto Instagram, though everything else in her life did. I let it slide because confronting it felt messy. Now I understood. It wasn't messy. It was calculated. "Want me to start pulling deeper records?" Jason asked. "Dig into Trey's personal accounts, business contacts?" "No," I said. "Not yet." Jason looked surprised. "You sure? You've got enough here to crush them both. Public embarrassment. Criminal charges, maybe." I stared at the screen again, at the numbers. The lines of betrayal mapped out like a financial crime scene. "She's already ruined herself," I said. "I'm just documenting the fall." Jason leaned back. "Damn, I almost feel bad for them." "I don't," I said. But even I knew. That wasn't entirely true. Because somewhere deep down I wasn't just angry. I was embarrassed. Embarrassed that I didn't act sooner. That I let her string me along while she built a life with someone else using my assets. Jason clicked save and backed up all the documents onto a secure flash drive. "You're still going through with the emergency asset petition?" "Already. Filed," I said. "By this time tomorrow, the courts will freeze anything she touched." "Good," he said, then looked at me. "You're not just doing this to win, are you?" "No," I replied. "I'm doing it so I never lose, like this again." We sat in silence for a moment. Then I stood, pocketed the flash drive, and turned to leave. She has no idea what she started, I said. Jason nodded. Neither does he. Harmon Fitness sat on a corner lot in a trendy district. Glass walls, matte black signage, bold white lettering that screamed modern success. The inside smelled of eucalyptus and effort. Motivational quotes were painted across the walls. No pain, no gain. Failure is just unfinished progress. It was all very curated, very fake. Trey spotted me the second I stepped in. He was taller than I expected, with capped teeth, a precision haircut, and the kind of tan that required maintenance. He strode over with a wide, rehearsed grin. "You must be Leonard," he said, extending a hand. "Dana's mentioned you." I didn't take his hand. "We need to talk," I said. "Privately." His smile dipped just slightly, but he gestured toward a glass-walled office in the back. "Sure thing. Let's go somewhere quieter." Inside the office, he closed the door and leaned against the desk like he was still in control. "What can I do for you?" I pulled a folder from my coat pocket and laid it on the desk between us. "This," I said, "is everything linking you and Dana financially. Co-signed loans, business credit lines, transfers from my accounts. Every lie you built your gym on." He frowned, opened the folder, and began flipping through. "I don't understand," he said. "These are legitimate business arrangements between Dana and me." I nodded. "Maybe, but the banks approved them using my financial profile. My income? My marital status. Dana leveraged our marriage to get you better terms, without my knowledge. That's fraud." His face paled as he flipped faster. "You can't prove I knew." "I don't have to," I interrupted. "The paper trail is enough to get the banks to call in every loan. And they will. Today." He looked up at me, panic starting to claw its way into his expression. "You're bluffing." I met his eyes evenly. "No, I'm informing you." He slammed the folder shut. "Dana said you were wealthy. Said money wasn't an issue for you." "It's not," I said. "But trust. And this wasn't about money. It was about respect. Something you and Dana clearly never gave me." He stood there for a beat, silent, breathing hard. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "Nothing from you," I said. "I just thought you should know what's coming. The loans, the equipment, your lease. All of it's about to disappear. Banks don't like being lied to. You could have just—" he started, then stopped. "What? Called you? Asked nicely? Played the fool?" He looked away. I turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing," I said. "When Dana left, she took a few things that didn't belong to her. Personal items, my father's watch, some family photos. Things money can't replace." He didn't speak. "If you come across them," I said, "I'd appreciate them being returned." His jaw tightened. "I'll see what I can do." I nodded once and walked out. Outside, the sun was harsh. The air smelled of sweat and pre-workout, and for the first time I felt nothing. No thrill, no satisfaction. Just an emptiness that lingered where love used to live. I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to understand what she'd lost. And soon, she would. The mediation room smelled like old wood and cold coffee. One of those government-issued conference rooms with beige walls and flickering overhead lights that made everyone look worse than they felt. I sat at the table, flanked by Marla, my attorney. Across from us, Dana and her lawyer, a young guy with too much gel in his hair and not enough real experience in his eyes. Dana looked diminished. Not broken, not yet, but close. Her outfit was still designer, but the confidence had been replaced with a flicker of something else. Uncertainty, maybe even fear. Her lawyer cleared his throat. "My client is willing to be reasonable about the division of assets, despite the aggressive tactics employed thus far." Marla smiled politely. "That's good to hear, because there's been a development." She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. The young lawyer picked it up. Dana leaned over to read. "The bank has completed its fraud investigation," Marla said smoothly. "They've determined that Dana forged Leonard's implied consent on multiple financial documents, co-signing loans, leveraging marital status, all without disclosure." The color drained from Dana's face. "Will Need time to review this, her lawyer said quickly. Of course, Marla replied. But you should know the bank has already referred the matter to the district attorney. This meeting is a courtesy before criminal charges are filed. Dana looked at me, eyes wide, voice barely above a whisper. Criminal charges? Leonard? I met her gaze steadily. I didn't file the report. The bank did. That's what happens when you commit loan fraud. Her lawyer leaned in, whispered something in her ear. She shook her head sharply. No, this is a scare tactic. You're trying to punish me. If Ms. Bowman is willing to sign our proposed settlement agreement today, Marla continued, sliding another document across the table, Leonard is prepared to provide a statement. That could mitigate the criminal implications. Dana's hands trembled as she reached for the document. He won't press charges for the theft of personal property, Marla added, or the unauthorized transfer from the joint account. That's the offer. Dana skimmed the pages, her fingers twitching. You keep your yoga studio, I said quietly, which was always profitable. You keep your car and your personal belongings. You receive no alimony, and you assume responsibility for the debts you incurred in my name. She didn't look up. And Trey? She asked finally. Mr. Harmon's financial issues are his own problem, Marla said. But without your husband's assets backing those loans, I understand the bank has already begun repossession proceedings. The silence that followed was heavy. Dana signed without another word. As we stood to leave, she caught my arm, her grip surprisingly firm. I never thought you'd fight back, she said. You always just went along with everything. I looked down at her hand, then at her face. That was my choice, I said. Just like this was yours. I walked out without looking back. The house wasn't much, but it was mine, a small craftsman on the edge of downtown Des Moines. 2 bedrooms, worn hardwood floors, a porch that creaked when you stepped on it. The kind of place that had character, not polish. Dana would have hated it. No granite countertops, no open concept, just quiet, space, and potential. I moved. In a month after the mediation, not because I needed to. I could have bought something bigger, flashier, I had the means, but I didn't want to impress anyone anymore. I didn't need to. The only person I had anything to prove to now was me. Jason came by on a Saturday to help me install cabinets. We worked in sync, like we always had, measuring, cutting, leveling, laughing quietly about how much better this was than filing fraud. Reports at 2 a.m. Anything from Dana? He asked, not looking up. No, I said, and I don't expect to. She knows better than to try anything now. I nodded. She got what she really wanted, a clean break. She just didn't think she'd have to pay for it. Jason passed me the drill. You could have buried her, pressed charges, taken everything. I paused, lined up the cabinet, and drove the screw in. What would have been the point, I said. She's no longer my problem. Later that evening, after Jason left, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon. The sun dipped below the tree line. A few kids played in a neighbor's yard. Someone's dog barked. There was no traffic noise, no performative brunch crowd. No curated life happening behind floor-to-ceiling windows. Just normal. Just real. I thought about the last 15 years, not with bitterness, but with a kind of detached curiosity. Like reviewing an old case file. All the signs had been there. I'd just chosen not to see them. Or maybe I saw them and convinced myself they meant something else. I took another sip. The bourbon burned, but in a good way, grounding, clarifying. Dana had once said she wanted to live well. I used to think that meant together. Now I understood. Living well isn't about cars or clothes or condo views. It's about sleeping through the night without checking your phone. It's about knowing your world won't collapse if someone leaves. It's about peace. The next morning I called my office and told them I'd be taking 2 weeks off. No emails, no calls. Then I packed a bag, locked up the house, and hit the road heading north. No itinerary, no expectations, just the open road. And for the first time in years, no invisible ledger of resentment to balance. No one to impress. Nothing to prove. Just freedom. And that was enough.